you play regularly with many orchestras around the world, but of course St. Louis is your home now, has been for several years, your orchestral home. Your second orchestral home is the BBC Symphony Orchestra, and here you are with the New York Philharmonic. What's the difference between those three orchestras? Do they have personalities? Are the American orchestras different from the British orchestra? Is the BBC Symphony and the New York Philharmonic maybe larger ensembles than St. Louis?
No, in fact, the differences of personality of an orchestra are absolutely fascinating to study. And sometimes they're very hard to quantify, and they will change appreciably with one single change of a player. And it struck me, it was the first time I was doing the Magic Flute. This is almost 25 years ago. And there I was, I'd done the overture, you know, with this same group of people. It was a small orchestra in Sweden, so there were about 35 players in the orchestra. And because of the way it worked, I basically came in and turned around and started the overture, and then the pit started to go down. It was a very sort of modern production. And so I didn't have time to really look around and greet the orchestra the way that it was done. It was come in, bow, and then first chord. And I remember one performance where I gave the first chord and immediately looked at the trumpet section. And I can't explain it any other way than there was a different soul in the orchestra. And sure enough, there was a different second trumpet. Now, it wasn't out of tune, it wasn't too loud, it wasn't an incorrect articulation. I mean, he'd worked with his colleague, he knew, but it was, you could hear a different person playing in the orchestra. And I think if you're sensitive to that type of thing, you do notice that the concept of an orchestra's personality is never a monolithic thing. It's a constantly changing thing, and you can both use that and enjoy that when you make different pieces of music. So it doesn't end up sounding the same, and you don't get quite the same things out of a group of people. I think the biggest danger is you can have so much fun. I had such a blast doing Also sprach Zarathustra with this orchestra about 5 or 6 years ago that the orchestras I have done it with since have just been a disappointment. And in fact, it's one of the reasons I like to leave a lot of time in between works and not do, say, the same work several times a season, because I find that I so enjoyed the particular spin that a group would give that work that I'll still be hearing that when I go to the next group.
If it's good, you want to savor it for a while.
Absolutely.
The program that you're conducting next week, well, actually the Mozart, Bartók, Brahms program is this weekend and next Tuesday. But
That's
then
right.
the following weekend is the second program you're doing with the Philharmonic,
Right.
which is Aaron Copland, Leonard Bernstein, Elliott Carter, and Christopher Rouse. I want to talk about the two composers in the middle of that group.
Okay.
Bernstein and Carter, they've both been very special to you. Why so?
You know, when Bernstein left us, there was a newspaper cartoon which I saw in the International Herald Tribune, and it was very moving because it had, you know, it basically said, goodbye, or thank you, Mr. Bernstein. And it had the planet, the world, sort of floating in space. And from it, there was a big music flag, as though it were an eighth note. And it was this way of saying, you have transformed the whole world with your presence on this planet. And it's absolutely true. I mean, I think there are very few people in history where it will take a very long time before we can begin to really find a sort of circumscribe just what their influence has been. I only met Bernstein once, so I can't say that I was personally influenced by his physical presence.
An introduction at a concert, or did you have a conversation with him?
It was at the end of a concert that he gave in 1982 in Copenhagen with the Vienna Philharmonic, and because of connections, I'd won a conducting competition in Denmark. I was able to get backstage to meet him, and I realized in the paltry thing that is this sort of 2 minutes or 3 minutes that you have, and he was very gracious, but you realize the complete impossibility of expressing just how much gratitude, admiration, inspiration, I mean, the words just go on, that you want to sort of give back and say, this is it. This is what you've meant to me, and I hope I can somehow convey this. And of course, you can. So you then backtrack and you realize, let me do this in a different way. Let me do this through trying to live up to the ideals that he had of sharing music. Let me live up to these ideals of playing his compositions for what they are, you know, really contain and the special quality that they have. And, you know, let me try and be as open and inviting whenever I'm playing music as you always felt that Bernstein was. And so I think that's, you know, that's kind of the legacy. I mean, it would be very hard for me to you know, unravel the threads of where, you know, where I think of.
I think so much of what you're saying is correct about Bernstein in that we don't know what he was to us yet. We're too close to it.
Well, and he was also, I think one of the great things about Bernstein is that he showed us how immensely complex all of us are. I mean, he was not an individual where there were, where everything was simple. I mean, even down to the point of what should I spend my time doing when you have these types of gifts to teach, to perform, to play, or to compose.
And what to compose,
you know,
for? The theater, the symphony?
Exactly. No, and I think this is one of the things, and we were talking about how to make this concert one of the year-long festival of Bernstein. And so we were talking about pieces to play, and you know, I said I'd love to do the first symphony, the Jeremiah Symphony. And so thank goodness that one wasn't taken. And so I did in fact get to do that, and we saw that Michel de Young would be available, and so that was then really the first piece that was anchored into the program.